Indie animation is falling apart, or at least the community is. If you keep even the smallest of tabs on indie animation, then you know that right now, the vibes are horrid. And it really feels like, as a community, the peaceful days of indie animation are behind us. As it feels like just about anything in this scene is attracting some sort of discourse. And there's three things in particular that I wanted to talk about: the Digital Circus finale leaking, the excessive criticism around Gameoverse, and the similarly strange reaction to Planetronika, an animated pilot with a creator who has most of animation Twitter blocked. And I don't fault the guy at all. So let's get into it, starting with the Digital Circus finale. What's happened with Digital Circus is so tragic in my eyes. With it being a show whose audience is primarily on YouTube, it's obviously going to be one of those shows where its reputation solely hinges on the image of the fandom. And my god, it has completely imploded during the gap between episodes 8 and 9. A lot of fans, or former fans of the show, don't really view it or Glitch in a favorable light right now, for a multitude of reasons, but a big one has absolutely been the finale's theatrical release, hitting theaters 2 weeks early ahead of its YouTube premiere, which upset a lot of people because they won't be able to catch the finale in theaters for one reason or another, thus putting them at the risk of getting instantly spoiled. The day that thing hits theaters, we were gonna get plenty of leaks, whether that be in the form of theater reactions or people recording for the sake of spreading plot points. Now, it's worth noting that this theatrical release is entirely on Glitch and no one actually involved with Digital Circus. Not only would this thing dominating the box office be really good PR for indie animation, but assuming it makes even a decent profit, Glitch would have the money and thus resources to not only fund more shows, but ideally pay all their employees better wages, as it's no secret that although indie animation is dominating, it does not pay nearly as well as animation jobs over at big studios because they don't have the corporate backing. But now fans don't have to worry about getting spoiled on June 3rd, because they can get spoiled right now. The Digital Circus finale leaked entirely. I still haven't watched it, but I think I'm fine waiting until it hits theaters. But obviously, a lot of people are going to care about spoilers, while there are a lot of people who watch the leaks and aren't talking about them openly or being as vague as possible as to not give away any big plot details. There are a lot of people who are just treating this thing as if it's already out officially. And to add insult to injury, there are a lot of people who don't like this finale and are making it known. And it's fun if you don't like the finale. Again, I haven't seen it. Maybe I won't vibe with it. But either way, I think it's truly demoralizing to not only have this finale leak 2 weeks ahead of its theatrical release, mind you.
We were right there, man!
But for people to vehemently hate it. And again, maybe I won't rock with the finale. But if I'm being completely honest, I am very skeptical on if the finale is actually that bad, or if people just want to hate on Digital Circus and Glitch. And I say this because, despite muting as many Digital Circus terms as I possibly could on Twitter because it just got to be way too much and admits valid concerns and criticisms, I've seen so many people go, "Oh, I told you so. Oh, I'm glad this shit leaked," which tells me that you're more invested in being a hater above anything else. And I think there's a difference between busting a move over this finale leaking and having an opinion of, "Oh, well, I'm not really surprised," or, "Oh yeah, that was the risk of distributing it," acknowledging the situation in a light where you don't pity Glitch without celebrating the leak or treating it like a good thing. Shrugging your shoulders and going, "Ah, they fucked around and found out," is a much different, much more calm, and I believe much more rational response than, "Yo, you heard they leaked the finale? Let's go!" Even though this is just a cartoon, I think the latter is not only unproductive, but is setting you up to constantly embrace negativity, which is going to make you a miserable and unhappy person. And I'm speaking from personal experience. Is it fun to be a hater, especially when it's over low-stakes media? Yeah, sometimes. But when hating is your go-to, when it's the main thing you do, even if you don't realize it, you're training your mind to default to negative emotions in any situation, which is not healthy and is not how we were meant to live as humans. I've seen so many people say Glitch had it coming. I'm glad this happened because they were being greedy, and it's like, come on, dude. Are they being greedy, or are you not able to catch it in theaters for one reason or another? Because I really don't think anyone who's still making greedy allegations at this point, even with all the information that we have, would be saying that if it was easy for them to secure a ticket and make it to the theater with no trouble whatsoever. To me, greedy is talk about charging $6 for a Crunchwrap or cheesy gordita crunch, an egregious price hike that's in effect all year round. A cartoon being in theaters for just a couple of weeks and then getting released for free for everyone else to see who couldn't make it into theaters, sure, that can be inconveniencing, but it's not greedy. I could see if it had scenes exclusive to theaters that no one else was ever going to see, if something crucial to the story was kept behind a paywall, but that's just not what's happening here. So I wish when it came specifically to the theater situation, people would stop trying to treat it as this huge moral thing, because at the end of the day, I just don't think it's that deep. If the theatrical release rubbed you the wrong way and you really are seeing Glitch in a different light, then just don't support it? I don't think it needs to become a huge thing. Just don't give Glitch your money and move on. I am very skeptical of the backlash this finale is already getting, because while I'm sure a lot of people probably are going to be disappointed, as that just seems to be a trend of series finales nowadays, I think a lot of people are just angry at Glitch or Digital Circus for one reason or another, and a feeling of, this was just alright, or this was just underwhelming, is getting amplified into something much more aggressive, which I just don't think is that necessary. Speak about what's really on your mind, but if you're just hating on the finale because you're mad at Glitch, or mad at Gooseworks for things she definitely could have handled better, I really don't know what's being accomplished except training yourself to always be in a negative state of mind. I just think once we get to this point, where a creator is burnt out on their creation in under 3 years just because it got so big, inviting so much stress and discourse, then I believe something has gone wrong. Glitch is still maintaining an optimistic point of view throughout all of this though, stating that we know it's been a lot online recently, but we're still so excited to show all of you this finale the way it was intended. Digital Circus has been an incredible 3-year journey, and the theatrical release is a celebration and a chance for everyone to watch, laugh, cry, and experience the ending together. To our artists and staff who made the finale possible, you all created something truly beautiful, and we're also incredibly proud of you. Unfortunately, Digital Circus isn't the only Glitch show attracting a lot of discourse, as it feels like people are still throwing anything at the wall to criticize Gameoverse, and I won't lie, I think a lot of these criticisms are hollow. Gameoverse was getting heat before it even premiered, catching Pibby allegations that had a lot of people soured on the show before they actually saw the pilot. And once the pilot came out, while it obviously won't be everyone's cup of tea, there's this cynicism around it that I believe is leading to a lot of disingenuous takes. We know how the internet works. When it comes to shows, the space unfortunately embraces the idea of judging a book by its cover. So even if they think Gameoverse is just okay, their opinion will still be presented in a way that makes it sound awful. But what are these takes? Well, there's a few I actually agree with that I believe is typical of any pilot or first episode. Not even just indie, just with television. The pacing's a little off. It feels like it doesn't know if it wants to be a kid's show or adult show, as the writing does feel very Saturday morning cartoonish. That scene where Gobbles gives Kit a reassuring pep talk has been getting memed on, and while I don't think it was poorly written or anything, it does feel like a ham-fisted, look, this show can get deep kind of moment that I think the pilot already manages to pull off in a couple of other moments that don't feel too cheesy or wordy because they're very light on dialogue. Meanwhile, a criticism that I'm kind of mixed on pertains to the fan service. A beach episode for the pilot is a wild swing, and while I don't think there's anything wrong with leaning into the fact that you have conventionally attractive characters, especially because Glitch is probably concerned they won't have a Digital Circus level show for a while, so they're kicking it old school and embracing the oldest trick in the book, boobs! I do agree that so far, it feels like all the women are confined to a certain look, while the men get to have varied body proportions and a wider spectrum of designs. But I think this can be remedied pretty easily in future episodes, by giving everyone a spectrum of designs that range from cartoony to hot. Like if all of Miss Info's info is going to be on display, then Dust better be walking around with an 8-pack and slinging some heat. And at the same time, I see no reason why we can't get girls who have sillier designs like flappers and gobbles. More variety in design will also help this universe feel alive, like a true hodgepodge of video games, instead of just a handful of archetypes. And if leaning into the fan service turns you off the show, that's fine, it just means it's not your cup of tea. Despite feeling like the writing can be a little tonally confusing, this ultimately clearly is not a kid show, and thus, if it wants to get sexy, let it be as sexy as it wants. As for the critiques that are driving me insane, again, it feels like they're throwing anything at the wall. Oh, why does this have so much merch? Other Glitch shows didn't have as much merch when they launched, as if Glitch isn't constantly growing as a company and thus are able to provide more resources to their newer projects. Not to mention, compared to something like Knights of Guinevere, where more merch would certainly be nice, Gameoverse is a show that feels like it just lends itself more to merchandise, whereas with Knights of Guinevere, too much merch or the kind of merch that they make might start to go against the show a little bit thematically, but that's just my hunch. I don't want to speak for any of the creators. The merch is a big part of how they make these cartoons, and considering people have made a stink over other other ways for Glitch to make money, I super fail to see the issue here. Especially when 10 years ago, cartoon fans would have killed for shows to get this much merch. The mid to late 2010s and early 2020s was not kind to animation merch, so it's nice seeing a company that actually gives a damn. Another criticism that's getting a lot of traction that I just don't vibe with at all, because if you look outside of animation, you'd see how nonsensical this statement is. But a lot of people are criticizing Gameoverse and really all the Glitch pilots for functioning as both pilots and first episodes. And what they mean by this is that a pilot should be focused on selling you the concept of the show, getting you acquainted with the characters and what they're all about, what an average episode could look like, and what to expect from the long haul. Whereas in this argument, first episodes, especially for serialized shows, are where the story begins and thus has a couple of different goals. It seems like the idea is that pilots are meant to set up characters, while first episodes are meant to set up stories, and that for one reason or another, your pilot's bad if you're trying to do both. And to that, I just have to ask, how many TV shows have you people actually seen? Not only does Gameoverse accomplish what a pilot is set out to do, as you could pretty accurately describe what the show is about after watching it. It's a show set in a video game universe about a girl named Kit and a robot named Caboodle who travel to different video game planets, helping the villain defeat the hero, because if the game is completed, the planet goes kaput. Do you not get that just from the pilot? Don't answer that, it's rhetorical. The answer is that you do. And you also get a feel for the characters. I do think it was a mistake having Kid and Caboodle separated for so much of the pilot, but even then, you could argue that gives you a feel for Caboodle as a character independent of Kit, and while I'm not big on that aforementioned moment with Gobbles, that also fleshes out his character. And beyond that, saying a pilot can't be the first episode just feels like such a huge self-report. Like, oh, Adventure Time, regular shows, Steven Universe, and all these other cartoons had pilots that weren't the first episode. A lot of those pilots got reworked into the show later. But newsflash, buddy, not everything works like that. There's a whole Wikipedia page for television episodes titled Pilot that, guess what, are the series premiere for these shows. Breaking Bad, Abbott Elementary, Euphoria, the list goes on. Even for animation, American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Futurama. A lot of those animated sitcoms, really. Pilots have doubled as the first episode for TV shows for years. So I'm sorry, if you subscribe to this take at all, you're just objectively wrong. It just feels like such a nothing critique so you can throw anything at the wall at any cartoon, because for some reason, people are fixated on tearing apart the self-made smaller scale projects over the executive-riddled corporate-made cartoons. And it's something that doesn't just extend to Glitch, because Planetronika, this innocent-ass pilot that came out, started attracting a lot of similar criticisms to Gameoverse, which is that this doesn't really work with a pilot, and that there's no real substance because it's focused on being gooned out. The latter of which I find egregious because there really is no fan service in this pilot. Oh no, Butterfly has a chest and curves. The horror! There may be like one or two shots pandering to horn dogs, but the pilot never lingers on it, nor is it present enough to really make a big deal out of it. I can see the pilot not doing the greatest job at selling someone on the show because apparently Butterfly is a space explorer and we don't really get much space exploring in this pilot, but it does seem more focused on showing us how a usual run-of-the-mill episode could go by focusing solely on the two main characters and how a simple game of basketball can escalate into absolute chaos. It's completely focused on their game and their homeworld. It feels like people just can't help themselves but to get overtly cynical when it comes to indie, and I feel like it's a mix of things. The creators rely on fan support, so they're much more accessible, and I feel like because viewers feel a lot more integral than normal TV shows, people mix up criticisms with trying to tailor the show to be made the way they want it to be, as opposed to wanting the creator to iron things out, but still bring their vision to life. I also think, to a certain extent, there is some envy at play. Maybe there's artists who dream of having their own popular indie show, but they're struggling to make it happen for one reason or another. So when they see all these other pilots popping off, getting all of this attention, and believing their idea is just as good, if not better, then they're gonna give in to temptation and join in on the dog pile. And on the other hand, I think there's people who don't really have a desire to make their own indie cartoon, but are tuned into the animation landscape as a whole, and are frustrated that a lot of the big indie cartoons are falling into similar categories, or that they feel like indie projects that deserve more attention are getting drowned out by lesser pilots. Either way, I think the current way the indie community is going about their criticisms is just not healthy and is becoming discouraging more than anything else. A growing sentiment that I've been seeing is that people are afraid to release their indie projects to go all in and make it happen, because what do they put in so much time and work just for people to turn around down and tear it to shreds without really giving it a fair chance. And that's something I really don't want to see happen. If you have a project you're passionate about, don't give up on it. Keep working on it. I think Glitch has the right idea where they try to return to positive framing at the end of the day. I know it's hard to drown out the negativity, and that's why I can't fault anyone for going on a blocking spree like the Planetronika creator. Just don't forget that people want to see your indie cartoon. People are craving more original ideas. Your thoughts and your stories matter. So please don't stop cooking. This video kind of turned more into a vent than anything else, but ultimately I wanted to make it because I feel like recognizing what's happening and trying to endorse healthier behaviors is how we're going to make progress. Keep creating, keep sharing, and if you're someone who's finding yourself constantly online and most of that screen time goes into negativity, please do some introspection. It is not too late. You do not have to live life as a miserable, bitter person. But with all that said, these are just my thoughts and I wanted to hear yours. How do you feel about the state of indie animation and its community? And keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at AllStrikeVox and at Roundtable Vids. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable notifications on so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace!
What we do here is go back.
Need something to throw on while you draw, study, or sleep? Roundtable Rewind's got you covered. So why not take a stroll down memory lane and subscribe?
No one can tell me what to do.
See you there.